I have a few thoughts on Liam Lawson, but I'll let you go first on this one. What did you make of his qualifying to begin with?
Oh, well, it was awful. Considering what he did in Australia or didn't do in Australia, it was exactly what he shouldn't be doing in China. You want to, if he came like, see if it was 15th, 14th, 12th, you would be like, that's disappointing. But it's plumb last.
Yeah.
Uh, and not like he was relatively close to Bortoleto, but it wasn't close. He just couldn't get, excuse me, he couldn't get the tires working. And maybe that's a novice thing because the tire pressures had to get them working to a certain window for them to be grippy enough. But you're in a Red Bull, you need to do better. Um, and if rumor are to be believed, that maybe a change may be coming sooner rather than later.
Yep, certainly maybe. The obviously the next race is Japan, which is Yuki Tsunoda's home race, and we'll get onto the race result very quickly before we touch on this. Oscar Piastri was first from Lando Norris, who jumped George Russell off the start, finished third. Verstappen finished fourth ahead of Ocon, Antonelli, Albon, Behrman, Stroll, Sainz, Hadjar. Lawson finished 12th in the end. Doohan, Bortoleto, Hulkenberg, Tsunoda, and Alonso was didn't finish. He DNF'd on the first lap. And then, as we get into it a little bit, Leclerc, Hamilton, and Gasly were all disqualified. But just sticking on the Racing Bulls and Red Bull, actually, for the moment. Yeah, Yuki Tsunoda had a brilliant weekend, but that 16th last on the last of the finishers does not represent that. Racing Bulls screwed him over again, and then his wing exploded.
Yeah.
There was no
Right on
contact.
the
It just
straight, put a bit of load and it just popped. That's a strange one.
very strange one.
You would like to think that's just a slight anomaly. Maybe it's just a micro crack or something, a wee fracture there for going over the curb, or is it just one of those anomalies where the bonding agent didn't quite work because it seemed to be between a couple of the winglets?
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
it
but
seemed to be. All right.
so that's definitely something that the team will need to go back on and have a look at. And for once, a Yuki Tsunoda tantrum about his broken wings came into the pitch was probably pretty well,
Fully warranted.
it'd be like, when, where, how? Like, yeah, even the
Yeah.
commentators were going, when
How'd
did
that
this
happen?
happen?
Yeah,
And then they saw the replay. So yeah, it's a shame. Yuki's been doing well. It's only been a couple of races, but he's just quietly got about his business.
certainly has.
Um,
Even Helmut Marko, who is, let's say, not famous for doling out compliments, has said that Yuki is in the form of his life at the moment. Which, okay, begs the question again. He sort of was towards the end of last year as well. Why is he not
mhm.
in the Red Bull yet? And I suppose this comes to the first big question of the day is, will he be for his home race in Japan, which is in 2 weeks?
Do you know what? I wouldn't be surprised. Uh, Liam Lawson isn't able to get where he needs to get now, and being in Red Bull, you kind of have to be. You kind of need to be on point. Uh, and for whatever reason, the car's just not working for him, or he's not able to figure the car out. And this is not, and it's not necessarily a reflection on him,
Hmm.
because how many second drivers have we had that in that Red Bull that can't do it? I mean, Max Verstappen is a generational talent and is able to work that car because it is so nuanced and deal with it. And drivers of his caliber are able to do that. But
Hmm.
you don't have many. You don't have 20 drivers that are of the caliber of Max Verstappen. You just don't. And the problem that Red Bull have had is the way they've treated the driver academy recently. You're kind of at a point where you're putting people in that aren't ready, and they've done that for a few years. Albon was supposed to be driving for Formula E, got the call to jump in. Within 6 months of he was out. They brought Brendan Hartley back, God knows how many times, because of his experience in world endurance racing. Um, I'm sure Kvyat's been out and in a couple of times.
Yeah,
And then
Nick
Gasly's
DeVries,
been in, he's been
Gasly.
out. And
So this kind of raises my question. My big one around Liam Lawson is, well, we saw him do pretty well in his deputizing duties for Daniel Ricciardo after he broke his wrist in 2023. Jeez, that
Mhm.
doesn't seem like that long ago. And then obviously he replaced Danny permanently in whatever they were called last year, racing the Carb
V-carb.
Bulls last year for 11 races, and apparently that was enough. But the question then is, it's no surprise, and it's all but been confirmed that that car is. We know it, but they've actually finally started saying it. That car is designed to suit Max's driving style. It's not that Max gets any more of the car. He doesn't get any like he might get new parts first, but he doesn't have like back in the days where Fernando Alonso or Sebastian Vettel would get a whole new wing for half a season that Mark Webber wasn't getting. It's not
Hmm.
like that anymore. They do get equal treatment in terms of all the parts. The fact of the matter is, the core concept, the fundamental platform of the car is designed around Max's style of driving, which is a pretty loose rear end and a super easy turn in. He just wants a really sharp nose and a loose back end, and for some reason, he can drive it like that. So, that being said, if Yuki steps up for Japan, and Yuki is in fantastic form at the moment. The results sadly do not show it right now, but you have to look a little bit beyond the final results, and you actually have to watch the races to understand. Yuki is driving extremely well at the moment. If he steps up and all of a sudden he's 20th, there can be absolutely no discussion whatsoever or debate. This is Red Bull's fault. I'm not saying that will
Hmm.
happen. Yuki steps up and dominates and goes and scores within a place of scores points and is right beside Max. Then conversation over. Liam wasn't the best choice in the first place. I don't think that's going to happen. Personally, I think if Yuki steps up, he's going to have the exact same problem at least in his first couple of races. And the thing with Red Bull is they don't give time to bed in. It's either you can do it or you can't do it, which basically means either you're Max Verstappen or you're not Max Verstappen. And everything in the entire universe is either Max Verstappen or not Max Verstappen. There's not
Hmm.
two of him. Um, so that's one thing. So I don't think I like if I was Yuki, I would be saying, lads, I'm like, where am I in the championship at the moment? Yuki Tsunoda is currently Oh, he's miles. Sorry, he's 13th in the championship, but he should arguably be after those disqualifications today. He had points coming. He should be in the top 10 comfortably in the championship at the moment. He's fighting for points and qualifying fifth. Why would he want to go into that Red Bull at the moment? Because he is as quick as Max in the Red Bull at the moment. Um, and if he does and he steps up and he can't do it, then there's no questions to be asked. So the other question then is what if Max had left this year? This is something I heard raised on another podcast because there was so much talk, and Toto Wolff was banging on the door, and Aston Martin are knocking as well. What if Max? It won't, and even like they must be designing next year's car in this same way because they don't seem to want to sacrifice even a millisecond of Max's performance to benefit the second driver, which has now gotten to the point of stubborn beyond belief because they know they can't win championships with just one driver anymore. So if they get 6 months into this year and they've designed next year's car, the fundamentals of next year's car around Max, and then Max leaves, what are they going to do? Call Sergio Perez back and put Liam Lawson, both of whom, in a car that they can't drive?
They're
Like,
going to get they're going to get the checkbook out and they're going to have to buy one of the someone else's marquee driver. They're going to have to do that. You're going to go out there and spend a shitload of money on your Piastri or Norris.
but will that be? Will they be? But this is the question as well: is would they be able to do a Piastri? Maybe, but is Norris going to be able to drive Max Verstappen's car? I don't think so. I think of everyone on that grid, Fernando Alonso probably could get to terms with Max Verstappen's car. Maybe Charles Leclerc, but I don't
Yeah,
see any of the rest of them doing it.
it is a tricky one. And if Yuki Tsunoda goes out to Japan and there's not some sort of weird situation where he ends up in the bottom three or the bottom five in qualifying, then you're right. The question has to be, it's the car then,
Yeah.
because everyone said that, like with the drivers we've mentioned, especially like guys like Alonso, Albon, sorry, they've all faltered. Arguably, Albon could have stayed longer if it wasn't for Lewis Hamilton spinning him in Austria when he was at the front. Because
Yes, that's
he
true.
could have won it. He did have a technical gremlin after. But again, what if? Uh, but if Yuki does what he's supposed to do, and see if he gets that car in Japan and gets it in 10th for Q3, then it's Yuki's drive for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Uh, that's all he'll be asked to do. Get it into Q3. Don't
Yep.
care about anything else. Just get it into Q3. And if he flings that car around and flings it into Q3, either his driving style is similar to
Max is.
Verstappen's, where
Yeah.
they can deal with the car, or he's just more adaptable. And then that's you've got your two drivers. Then you can work on. Then Liam Lawson can go back and do what Albon did. Liam Lawson going back to the racing bulls after two races is a horrible thing to happen. It's not the end of his career.
It's the best thing for his season, arguably.
Best thing. Look at Albon.
Yeah.
Gasly. They've both survived I don't think Albon's won a race since, but
Al
Gasly's won.
Albon hasn't, but
So,
Gasly has. Carlos Sainz has after being dumped out of Toro Rosso.
hmm
Even Daniel Ricciardo left and eventually went and won a race again for McLaren. So it's a career killer if you stay there. It's not a career killer to be dumped out. I think that's the
No,
like look at Sergio Perez. I can't see Sergio Perez coming back to Formula One. I know everybody thinks he's coming back to Cadillac. He's not. He's just not. I'd be
no,
shocked if that happens because they're not going to need his money. And as we said a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, it's more likely to be someone like a Bottas who is probably actively testing in the wind tunnels and the simulators next year's cars, which Sergio Perez is not doing.
no.
Um, that is
Sergio
a
Perez
career
could be
killer.
a good driver in IndyCar, to be honest.
He absolutely could. And I've said this 1,000 times. Sergio Perez is a world-class midfield driver. And I mean that in the greatest compliment in the world. You've got plenty of, like, not everybody could be a world champion.
No,
But compare Sergio Perez to Nico Hulkenberg. Nico Hulkenberg's never got a podium. Sergio Perez has won multiple races and dragged his crappy racing point and whatever it was called before that, Force India,
Force
into
India.
podiums all the time. He nearly won a race with Sauber in 2012. He came one damp patch in Malaysia away from beating Fernando Alonso to a win in his second season. So Perez is a good driver, a very, very good driver who on his day can do it, but his day only comes every now and then.
Yep.
But he's beyond it now. I think Liam Lawson could be the same. I think Yuki Tsunoda could be the same. If you give them the opportunity, they'll take it. But it's easier said than done when Max Verstappen, like you said, generational talent. It's like you couldn't ask somebody to hop in Ayrton Senna's car and drive it the way he did it. Alan
No,
Prost is proof of that, and Alan Prost is one of the most successful drivers in history. And even he
one of the
couldn't
most,
get fully on terms with Senna.
yeah, and he's one of the most technical drivers.
Exactly.
He was nuanced a bit like was it Schumacher, and it was very much to the second. Everything was professored out
Yes,
to share his
methodical.
nickname.
Yeah.
Yeah, methodical. That's probably the better expression. And he still couldn't work it. And that's the thing. I think a lot of people are, they're putting on a bit of weight here about Liam Lawson. They're putting on like the second driver. This is what we mean about generational talent.
Hmm.
This is the point. Like Valtteri Bottas, very similar to Perez in a sense of he's a good driver. He can win races. You put him up against Lewis Hamilton. It's not a
He's
contest.
he's not
It's
winning
just
the
not
championship.
happening.
Yeah.
And that was why we always laughed at the start of the season when Bottas was like, yeah, here's Bottas 2.0. Yeah,
3.0,
cool.
4.0, 5.
No
Yeah.
bother, Paul. Yeah,
To
crack on.
Bottas's credit, he is the only driver from in Mercedes history with a 100% Q. Sorry, he's the only driver, yeah, in Mercedes history with a 100% Q3 record. He
Fair
never
enough.
ever missed Q3, which is a really impressive stat that I read last week when Kimi Antonelli didn't make Q3. It's like Valtteri continues his trend, so that was impressive. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to see what Red Bull do now. Like, do they leave Liam here? There's also, sorry, the other point I wanted to make, just kind of in Lawson's defense a little bit, is he hasn't had any practice.
No, it doesn't. It's never raced in these two tracks.
He's never raced on these two tracks, and actually, Karun Chandog made the point after the race. Um, that Kimi Antonelli was given 10,000 kilometers of test mileage last year in old Mercs.
Hmm.
Old Mercs which are not that different to the current Merc. And because Red Bull were humming and hawing and kicking the can down the road, they couldn't make up their bloody minds.
Have you
And
seen that
then
the last one signed before this season
yeah, he
anyway?
was, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But even when it came down to it, when they had signed him, they had plenty of time. They had December, they had January, they had all of February, and they'd half a March to give him runs in old cars, and they never did. They gave him preseason testing, which was a day because the car was crap and he got no mileage. And then he goes into Australia, and there's a practice session which was red flagged, a third practice session which was red flagged, which he missed anyway because there was a fault with the car. So he had no practice for Australia, which is a bloody tough track anyway that he'd never driven.
hmm
And then he comes to China, a track he's never driven, gets 1 hour of practice, and then has to do two qualifying sessions and two races. So, in Liam Lawson's defense, and I'm really surprised that like Sky or like no media has pointed this out yet, other than Karun Chandok today, Liam Lawson has had virtually zero running in that car.
Yeah.
And that's
That,
okay if you're Gabriel Bortoleto and you're a talented driver, but you're actually expected to drag your wheelie bin to last on the road every weekend.
exactly. I
For
mean,
Liam Lawson, like he's had no practice at all. So the flip side of it is, do they wait until Japan, a track he knows very well because he raced in Super Formula there for years, and he raced in Formula Two there and Formula Three, so he knows Japan, he knows Suzuka as well as anyone else. And they see if a track that he knows can improve it, and then maybe sack him off after that if he can't pull it out of the bag.
It is a very poor indictment of the way that Red Bull are running their stuff just now. Obviously, Mercedes were they done it the right way. They kind of, even with all the talk about Verstappen coming, I don't think Toto Wolff was ever going to do anything about that. I think it was just gamesmanship between him and Horner. I
Mm.
think they'd said pretty much early on and internally that, Antonelli's next season. So I need you guys, pre-season last year, right, we're going to go with Antonelli. Unless something majorly bad happens, I need you guys to set out a 12-month plan
Mm. To get this
and
kid ready.
you get him in these cars and you just go, simulator and just get him in the environment. Obviously, things didn't work out in his first free practice session, but they must have had a shitload of data behind them to look at it and go, do you know what? Yeah, fine.
He's worth
You'll
the
figure it
risk.
out.
Yeah,
We're going with it. And as you say, to fire someone in, I mean, look at the changing conditions for Australia. I mean, Australia caught out
everybody.
a race winner and a multiple world champion.
Yeah.
You really, and then China, he's never raced on either. Although,
W-
yes, it was dry. And with a car that's so particular as Red Bull, you would think that they would have said, right, you've got 2.5 months. We are going to run you and drive you. You're going to be doing this. This is all your life is. Move into the garage, get your sleeping bag. We're doing this. You're training, eating, driving, and that's it.
Yeah.
And you're doing it for two months or whatever. Um, and then if he comes out and if he was like 12th, 13th, 14th, but he's like zero point 0.4, 4 tenths away, you can go, do you know what? That's not bad. But being dead last twice and
Yeah.
unable to figure out the nuances to get the car out, the tyres into the right window, that's learned. That's something that you learn as you go. And Red Bull, I can understand their changes, but it's not an indictment of Liam Lawson. That's an
No.
indictment of the system. That's an indictment of them,
Yeah.
and probably more Marco than anybody else. If you're coming out and saying things already, Christian Horner seems to be the person to say we'll work with him. We'll try and figure this out.
But he always is. I mean, he said we'll give Alex time, and then he fired him. He said we'll give Sergio time, and then he did, and then he fired him.
Yeah,
Um,
I suppose. I
but
suppose he's
at
saying the
least
right thing.
in public, at least he's saying the right things. Unlike Marco is just going, "Yeah, you're embarrassing. You're crap. You're awful. Get out."
Yeah, and
A man, by the way, who is not employed by Red Bull and has absolutely zero platform to be saying any of this, but he's allowed to be, which is another problem with Red Bull that's been going on for way too long.
yeah, and I think what a pretty big eye opener as well when they interviewed Christian Horner. Liam Lawson was 20th, and Ted Kravitz basically kind of nailed him and said, I mean, you didn't sack off
Saxon.
Perez. Why did you sack Perez off to get 20th on the grid? And you're like, who else do you do that to? 'Cause you haven't said that. Like, Antonelli didn't have a great first qualifying in Australia. Did they do that to him and go, well, you didn't bring in him to replace, Hamilton and get 14th or 15th? What you doing? And as you say, there seems to be a short memory about the actual experience and training and lead up time that Red Bull have not given Lawson.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
maybe him moving is just a clear sign of, do you know what? He's not quite got to the point, but some of it's on us. And we're going to put you back on the Red Bulls. We're going to take the pressure off you. We're going to work with him, get the systems in place. But then again, he's going to be spending a season in a car that's not the Red Bull. And it's the Red Bull car that's the problem.
and exactly. And if so, say he steps up and Yuki has an okay season, and then he earns himself an Aston Martin Honda drive for next year.
Mhm.
Wild speculation. And all of a sudden, there's a slot free at Red Bull again, and Lawson steps back up. It's the same problem because fundamental, even Max Verstappen himself said that Liam Lawson would be quicker in the racing bulls, and a lot of people were like jumping down Max's throat for this. Oh, you disrespectful prick, and blah 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 blah. He's right. And he
Yeah.
probably meant it with the greatest of respect because he himself knows that that car is designed for his particularly unique driving style,
Mhm.
which even he can't seem to fully explain how he gets the most out of it. He just sort of can. And he's saying Liam will be quicker in the racing bulls. And okay, maybe he meant it as a jibe and people are taking it in all offense, but he is right. That's just the end of it. And again, you look at like if like Alex Albon or Carlos Sainz or Pierre Gasly were probably all on the consideration list for last year. Why would any of them want to go back to Red Bull? ever. Why would anybody want to take that? Like Daniel Ricciardo is maybe the one who you'd think, well, he has nothing else to play for, bring him back. But if he's looking at that going, lads, you've already ruined my career twice. Why would I want to do it a third time? Like that cup is that car is such a poison, and I can't believe that we're still having this conversation because it's been what Kvyat, Gasly, Albon, Perez, technically Ricardo,
Mhm.
and now Lawson have all come up against Max in a car designed for Max and not been able to drive like Max because, shocker, they're not Max. And we're still
Yep.
sitting here going, oh, well, they're just not good enough for Formula One. Bullshit. It's
Yeah.
they're not Max Verstappen. And that's okay. Not every, but like I said, like that, like, is it a bad thing to not be Max Verstappen? Sure, you're not a four-time world champion, but not everybody can be Max Verstappen.
And that's fundamentally the main reason why Red Bull don't win constructors championships because they
And
don't seem to get that. They don't seem to take that on board. You give some slight nuances to your car. If Lewis Hamilton's there and he says move the cockpit back a wee bit, and he's already won you 6 championships, well, you're going to listen to him.
And exactly, sorry, that's the other point as well, is Red Bull refused to give up even an inch to Max. But if Max is the generational talent that we all know him to be, he'll fucking adapt. He'll
Yeah,
pull back,
that's
change 1% of the car to help your second driver, and tell Max to get 1% better. Or
uh,
Max,
uh,
Max, Max being 1% worse than himself is still better than almost every other driver on the grid.
exactly. And you look at this year, like the car's just not there, and they need both
Yeah,
drivers. And they're going to throw Liam Lawson under the bus because I don't think he's going to come out and do amazing when he goes to Japan. With the
no,
knowledge of the track, I still think there's going to be issues. I think he might get a Q2. If he gets Q3, then okay, right.
yeah, different
Let's
story.
let's let's leave him. Probably the summer break
But
at that
I think
point.
the
But
pro
I
the problem
still
with that
think there's
car,
issues.
it's the fact that it's a loose rear end. Even at high speed, like even Max, like you saw him today, like going through the first corner and the last that the was the turn 12 coming onto the back straight.
Hmm.
Long, fast, flat out right-handers. And he's twitching like crazy. He just happens to be able to hold it in a straight line, twitching like crazy because the back is so
Hmm.
loose. That's going to be the same in Japan. Japan is a fast flowing circuit. And if you have a sharp rear end and a loose as hell back end and you don't know how to drive that way, he might as well go enjoy Tokyo Drift for
Yep.
all the speed Lawson is going to be able to pull out of that car going through the Senna S's in Japan.